It's Marco from Craft Coffee Spot, and today we're going to be going through the Breville Barista Pro. I've been using this for over a year and really enjoy it. In my mind, it's a great beginner home barista machine and one of my favorite models from Breville. I like that it has some of the latest technology and also that it's got good workflow and also that it costs under $1,000. And so we're going to spend more of this time just actually pulling some espresso shots and talking about some tips and tricks that I've learned from using this. But to start, let's just kind of give you a quick overview. You can tell this is one of Breville's newer models. It's got the kind of rounded edges and the brushed steel, and they've kind of replaced the big buttons on some of the older Barista Express with smaller buttons and an LCD screen. And I like this screen because you can actually change a lot from it. You can actually just use the menu button and your dial grind amount button, and you can change the kind of custom 1 cup and custom 2 cup. Also, you can change the water temperature here. Go up 2 degrees, up 4 degrees, or down 2 degrees, or down 4 degrees. And you can also just go into cleaning modes for descaling and back flushing. So it's really easy to use. You also have kind of some small ease of use features here where you have a low water sensor in the water tank. You've got the hidden compartment here for your filter baskets and other accessories. And then you have a spout as well that kind of angles right underneath the brew head if you want to make tea or just make an Americano and add some hot water to it. It's just really convenient, small things there. What also I like is that it has Breville's latest ThermoJet heating system. It's essentially a thermo block, but upgraded so that it's a lot thinner metal and it's almost more of a substrate. So heat transfer is just really efficient. So notice if I turn the machine off and then try and turn it back on again, it generally takes about 3 seconds. And that's not just because it was on to begin with, but it almost always heats up in 3 seconds. And I like that, and I just find it has pretty good temperature consistency, especially for a thermo block machine. Now, you have this integrated conical burr grinder, which is very nice because it just doses right into the portafilter underneath, and it's a timed dosing. But I'll be honest, it may be part of the low point here of the machine. And I say that because it's not quite as consistent, and the grounds tend to come out a little bit clumpy. So when we work with espresso here, you notice I'm going to use a WDT. It's this kind of needles that you want to use when you bring out the grounds. And one thing I also want to talk about with the grinder that I think is an important tip that gets overlooked is that you could actually do a macro adjustment on the grind size. So normally we talk about how there's these micro adjustments, these 30 steps on the knob on the right, which is really nice to use. That you can go in a pretty wide range and a pretty granular range there too on the micro side. But sometimes you'll notice that you may be for grinding too fine consistently or too coarse consistently. And what you want to do is you want to make sure you kind of change that macro adjustment right away. What you can do is you could actually take off the bean hopper here on the top, pop that off, and then you can actually also turn out the outer ring of the burr. Within that, you'll see there's some what I call the macro adjustments there. And if you're grinding too fine, you can actually change that outer burr a little finer, and it'll help just kind of bump up your settings. You can, again, use the full range of the machine. So once you've kind of changed that, once you've kind of gotten acclimated to the LCD, let's actually brew some coffee right now and kind of show just how I go through the workflow here and some of the easy use functions. So today we're going to be using Unicorn Blood. It's actually a local roaster, dark matter here in Chicago. And normally I'd say get a bottomless portafilter, but today we're just going to use the Breville portafilter. Honestly, it has a pretty good spout underneath, nice metal components, a little bit of plastic on the inside, but this is going to work just well. I think it's a good example of just what you can do with this machine. And so we're going to start, and we're going to put the grind size right in the middle of the range here. Okay, so 15 grind size. I think grind time, let's go 12 seconds. And I think one actually tool you want to have is a scale. And I'm just using this kind of fairly entry-level Apex Stone scale, but I think it's great. It's durable. It has a timer on it and a nice backlight, and that's really all you need. But it'll help a lot because keep in mind, while you're grinding by time, it doesn't tell you what the weight is. And you really want to know what your weight of coffee going in is and then your espresso coming out is. That's really important to control. So now we'll dose the coffee. Got my knock box here, another useful tool, especially if you're kind of standing still or don't have a sink next to you. About 17 grams. I usually go 15 all the way up to 18, depending on how fine I'm grinding. 17 is pretty good here. Again, we're just going to use a Breville tamper. I have another tamper that I use, Lux House, that's a little better, but honestly, for the purpose that we're doing, this is fine. Couple side taps, couple bottom taps, get it level. lock it in. It's actually a glass measuring cup here that we'll use to start out. Use my scale again. Now, like I said earlier, you can customize all the doses. From now, we're going to use a manual dose. And one thing you can do, you can just hold the button, it'll go into manual mode. And when you do that in manual, it'll initially give you a low pressure pre-infusion. And that's really nice. So it goes about 2 bars of pressure as you hold down the button in manual. And when you let go, it goes to the full pressure. And that extra manual pre-infusion time just helps soak the grounds more evenly. So when the full pressure hits that 9+ bars, it'll just be more even grounds and reduces channeling. Just better flavor. Okay, so we get about 45 grams out. So we actually have a longer shot here, which generally will make it a little more bitter, but you can see it gets a pretty nice crema. So pretty good for a first start. I'll actually pour this in a smaller shot glass here. So I'm noticing a couple things. First, it tends to be a little more bitter. And that kind of makes sense because I pulled about a 3-to-1 ratio of coffee out versus coffee in. That's usually what happens. Second thing I noticed is it's a little lighter in body. And it's a little bit more like, more of like a non-fat milk. You'll get a little more watery taste to it. And so what that tells me is, less the burntness, it's a little bit more excited the higher ratio, but the thinness is because of the grind size. And so we're not quite getting the full flavor in. I had these beans before. They tend to be pretty sweet and usually pretty smooth as well. So I'm going to try and dial in high ratio, pull out a little bit less water here, and a little bit less espresso, and also dial in. So let's go down to a 12 grind size. Let's still do 16 grams, but we'll stop the coffee brewing much earlier. Now, one thing too, is I had mentioned, when you start this machine, you want to preheat it, but also when you're in between shots, you also want to rinse it out. Just run another blank shot there. Okay, so now we've reset and we're ready for shot 2. Like I said, I turned down the grind size to about 12 setting, and we're going to make sure we don't take out as much coffee. Now, one thing too to point out as well is that you're going to want to actually increase your grind time, because as you grind finer, it actually takes a little longer. This is why you should always have a scale and always be double checking the weights you're getting out. Little tap to even out the grinds. Okay, we're now down to about 16.5, which I think is good enough here and close to where we were originally. So actually, we'll do one more step on this one to really make sure it evens it out. We'll use this WDT device. Nice little moment of zen here as you stir it around and break up all those clumps. Like I said, on the Breville grinder, it tends to be quite clumpy. Level out the grounds one more time and tamp. Okay, so now we're ready to pull our second shot, and again, we'll do it manually with about a 10-second pre-infusion, and then we'll stop once we get to about 35 grams. Okay, so we got less coffee out. We still ended up getting close to 40 grams. That was better than before, which is good. And you can tell it took a little bit longer. It actually took a couple seconds longer than the first shot, which just tells you that we are grinding finer. So even though we distributed the grounds, we ground finer, and we did pull out some less coffee. And so let's see how it tastes. So you're certainly pulling out a lot more sweetness now. My guess is that's a lower ratio. But the body didn't change actually that much, and it still flowed pretty quickly. It stopped at about 22 seconds, so we still didn't even really get to our normal 30 seconds of pull time. So I'm actually going to dial in a little bit more, keep grinding a little bit finer. And this is part of the key. You keep grinding finer and finer, and eventually it won't flow, and then you'll know you're too fine. But besides that, it can just help accentuate more of the flavor. So now we're going to go down to a 10 grind size. Everything else we're trying to keep constant. As I said before, you want to clean out your brew head. Okay, we've reset yet again for shot number 3. This time we've ground a little bit finer. but we're still going to pull out 16 grams and again try and go even a little less than 40 grams here. See how it tastes. Okay, 16 grams, WDT, break up those clumps. Tamp. Now we're going to go to shot 3. Same thing as before. Try and keep as many variables consistent as possible and only changing one thing at a time. That's the best way to tell how the flavor is. Okay, so this took about the same amount of time, but I did pull out a lot less espresso. Now we're about 36 grams, and it took us about 23 seconds yet again. Let's see how this tastes. Okay, now I'm really getting the sweetness. So I really like this one. So yeah, this is exactly what I remember trying Unicorn Blood before from Dark Matter. It's an excellent blend. It's usually really smooth, really rich, a nice amount of sweetness, plus a nice body to it. And this is it. And so what did we learn? Well, we started at a 15 grind size and pulled a long shot. It's actually a 3-to-1 ratio, and found it was too burnt and too thin. Went down to a 12 grind size, pulled more like a 1 to 2.5 ratio, did a WDT, found more sweetness came out, a little more body came out of it, then actually ground even finer down to a 10 grind size on this, and even a smaller ratio, a proper 2-to-1, and it came out perfect. And so you can just tell as you kind of grind finer and finer, it's actually accentuating more of the flavor. Now, I think there's an important note here in that we've just pulled, 3 different shots of espresso here, all kind of laid out on the table. And it's important that when you're learning how to make espresso, you got to drink a lot of espresso. And I'll get asked, well, how do you know the proper sour versus bitter taste, or how do you know the complexion's right? It means like you just have to keep tweaking your recipe. And so here, like I said, we found that by dialing in finer, which is usually the case, it'll make it better. So now that we've done that and kind of just understood like how the workflow is in the Barista Pro, because again, when you're trying these many espressos, to be able to just kind of quickly tweak the grind size, quickly see your shot time, and then if you have a scale, you can see your volume in and out really easily. It helps a lot, and it's a lot easier than a lot of other machines out there. So one last thing to show you is the steam wand and the milk steaming process here. And the nice thing about the Barista Pro is the steam wand does have a 4-hole tip, which just steams a lot faster, and the ThermoJet also switches to steaming pressure pretty quickly and actually has more pressure than some of the older machines. So I really like it. It's pretty easy to use. So first, we'll fill up the milk. Now, one thing I found is that you should actually turn the steam wand on for a little bit, let it dispel that water, and then stop it, and then start steaming. It helps you kind of get rid of just dumping water into your milk. Quick stop. Start over again. Get the tip just below the surface so you hear that nice hissing noise. And once it starts to warm up, get the tip underneath the surface. Keep your vortex going to incorporate the air. Got a nice vortex going here. As it becomes too hot to touch, turn it off. Clean it off. Give our milk a couple swirls. Knock out all the big bubbles. See if I can pour latte art. Actually, that's not bad. Not bad by my standards. Not good by professional standards. Okay, so we've made several shots of espresso. We've steamed milk. Got actually a decent latte art here. So where does that leave me on this machine? Well, like I said at the start, I really like it. I think it's very beginner friendly because it's a fully integrated workflow. It costs under $1,000, and that's actually pretty hard to find. Honestly, if you want to get like an alternative setup, I would tell you to look at a Gaggia Classic Pro and a DF64, which is actually kind of my secondary setup at home that I've been using. And that combination will actually get you a better espresso. The Gaggia Classic has a boiler, a 58 millimeter portafilter, and a DF64 is a flat burr grinder. It's actually really nice. But I can tell you, it's not going to be as easy to use. When you have two separate devices, you have to transfer the portafilter between, and the Gotcha Classic has almost no control to it. You can't change the water temperature, and you're going to have to really be thoughtful about kind of your grind size and your ratios here. So that's something, if you really want to be advanced, you can go that level. But I think as I demonstrated here, you can actually do a lot with the Breville Barista Pro. You can really tweak your grind settings. You can really change your shot volumes and even your water temperature, which we didn't even go through. And the steam one is pretty excellent in my mind. So I'm going to put a link to this product below. I'm actually going to have more detail on our blog if you want to see that. And if there are any more follow-ups you want to see on the machine, let me know in the comments below, and I'm happy to shoot another follow-up video. And if you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe to see those future videos.